The gunshot cracked through the still summer air like thunder, sending birds scattering from the cottonwoods as Amelia Calloway's mare reared in panic. One moment she was astride her horse, the next she was tumbling backward, her scream cut short as the rope around her waist snapped taut and dragged her across the dusty ground of Hill City, South Dakota. It was 1878, and Amelia had never imagined her 22nd birthday would end with her being pulled through dirt and gravel, her skin tearing against rocks and cacti as her own frightened horse bolted away from the gunfire. The men who'd ambushed her had fired their weapons to spook her mare, laughing as they watched the young schoolteacher's body bounce helplessly behind the panicked animal. Miles Grayson had been riding back to his ranch outside Hill City when he heard the gunshots, and a woman's scream cut short. He dug his heels into his stallion's flanks, pushing the beast to a gallop as he crested the hill overlooking the main road. What he saw made his blood run cold, a chestnut mare galloping wildly down the path, dragging what appeared to be a woman's limp body behind it. Whoa, thunder. He shouted to his horse as he urged it forward, racing to intercept the panicked mare. As he drew closer, he could see the woman was conscious, desperately trying to protect her head with bloodied arms as she was dragged across the unforgiving terrain. Miles pushed his stallion harder, drawing alongside the terrified mare. With one hand gripping his reins and the other reaching for his knife, he made a desperate grab for the mare's bridle, nearly losing his balance in the process. The horse fought him, eyes rolling white with fear, but Miles managed to slow its pace enough to reach down and slice through the rope binding the woman. He leapt from his saddle before his horse had fully stopped, rushing to the woman's side. Her dress was torn to shreds, her skin abraded raw in countless places, blood seeping from a gash on her forehead. Yet it was her eyes that struck him most wide with terror, yet somehow still defiant. "You're safe now, madam," Miles said, his voice low and steady as he gently gathered her into his arms. "I've got you." Her entire body trembled violently, whether from shock or pain or both, he couldn't tell. Miles simply held her, one arm supporting her shoulders, the other stroking her dust-coated hair as he murmured reassurances. "Who did this to you?" he asked when her shaking had subsided enough for her to speak. "Cavendish's men," she whispered through cracked lips. I refused his offer." Miles felt his jaw tighten. Darius Cavendish was the wealthiest man in Hill City, a cattle baron who believed everything and everyone had a price. Miles had tangled with him before, and the scars on his back were testament to what happened to those who crossed the powerful rancher. "My name's Miles Grayson," he said, helping her to sit up. "I have a ranch about 5 miles north of here." "Amelia Calloway," she replied, wincing as she touched her bleeding forehead. "I'm the new schoolteacher in Hill City, or at least I was supposed to start tomorrow." Miles frowned. This is how they welcome the new schoolteacher. What kind of offer did Cavendish make that warranted this? Amelia's eyes lowered. "He wanted me to tutor his son privately instead of teaching at the school. When I explained I was contracted to teach all the children of Hill City, not just the privileged ones." She gestured to her battered body. "His men said they were teaching me a lesson in proper respect." A muscle twitched in Miles' jaw. "These wounds need tending. My ranch is closer than town." "Can you ride?" she nodded, though the movement clearly caused her pain. Miles whistled and his horse trotted over obediently. With gentle hands, he helped Amelia to her feet, steadying her when she swayed. "I can't leave without Penny," she said, looking around for her mare. "Your horse is long gone, I'm afraid, but we'll find her. First, we need to see to your injuries." Miles lifted Amelia onto his horse, noting how she bit her lip to keep from crying out as her lacerated body made contact with the saddle. He mounted behind her, one arm circling her waist to hold her steady as he took the reins with his free hand. "Lean back against me if you need to," he said softly. "It's a short ride." The journey to Miles' ranch was mercifully brief, but each step of the horse seemed to increase Amelia's discomfort. By the time they arrived at the modest but well-maintained homestead, her face had gone ashen beneath the dirt and blood. An older man with weathered features hurried from the barn as Miles brought the horse to a halt in the yard. "Hank, Prepare a bath and fetch the medical supplies, Miles called to his foreman. And send Jack to look for a chestnut mare loose on the south road. Right away, boss, Hank replied, his eyes widening at the sight of Amelia's condition. He disappeared into the main house without further questions. Miles dismounted first, then carefully lifted Amelia down. Her legs buckled, and he swept her into his arms, carrying her toward the house as if she weighed nothing. I can walk, she protested weakly. I've no doubt, Miles replied with a small smile, but humor me. The interior of Miles' home was surprisingly comfortable for a bachelor rancher. Clean pine furniture, polished floors covered with woven rugs, and shelves lined with books spoke of a man who valued more than just cattle and horses. Miles placed Amelia gently on a sofa in the sitting room. Hank's preparing a bath for you. After that, I'll tend to your wounds. You. Amelia asked, a hint of alarm in her voice. I was an army medic during the war, Miles explained. Unless you'd prefer Hank's wife to come from town, it would take about an hour to fetch her. Amelia shook her head slowly. No, I trust you. I've never been tended to by a man before. I'll be professional, Miss Calloway. You have my word. While they waited for the bath to be prepared, Miles brought Amelia water and a clean cloth to wipe her face. As she removed some of the grime, he could see she was a beautiful woman despite her current state. Auburn hair, now matted with dust, framed a face with high cheekbones and intelligent green eyes. A faint dusting of freckles crossed her nose, giving her a youthful appearance that contradicted the strength he'd seen in her gaze. Why did you come to Hill City? Miles asked, partly to distract her from her pain and partly out of genuine curiosity. Educated women weren't common in this part of South Dakota, especially not ones willing to stand up to men like Cavendish. My father was a teacher, Amelia replied, her voice steadier now. He believed education was the great equalizer, that knowledge could lift a person from any circumstance. When he passed away last winter, I decided to honor his memory by bringing education to places that needed it most. And you chose Hill City because... A ghost of a smile touched her lips. The advertisement said the town was progressive and cultured. I suspect that may have been an exaggeration. Miles couldn't help but chuckle. Just a small one. We do have a church, a general store, and now a schoolhouse. That's more than most settlements in these parts. And a man like Cavendish who thinks he owns everything, including the new schoolteacher, Amelia added bitterly. Cavendish is powerful, but he doesn't speak for all of Hill City, Miles assured her. There are good people here who want their children educated. Hank appeared in the doorway. Bath's ready, boss. I've laid out some of my Sarah's clothes that might fit the lady. Thank you, Hank, Miles said, rising to his feet. He offered his hand to Amelia. Do you need help getting to the washroom? I'll manage, she said, accepting his hand to stand but then walking on her own, albeit slowly and painfully, to where Hank indicated. Once Amelia had closed the door behind her, Miles turned to his foreman. Hank, I want every man we can spare riding patrol tonight. If Cavendish's men show up here, I want to know before they are within a mile of the house. You think they'll come after her? Hank asked, his weathered face creasing with concern. Men like that don't take kindly to someone interfering with their fun, Miles replied grimly. And Cavendish has had it in for me since I refused to sell him my water rights. The boys won't let anyone near, Hank promised, before heading out to organize the ranch hands. Miles gathered the medical supplies, clean bandages, salves, alcohol for disinfecting, and waited for Amelia to finish bathing. His mind kept returning to the moment he'd found her, the terror in her eyes slowly giving way to relief as he cut her free. Something about her courage in the face of such brutality stirred feelings he'd thought long buried after the war. When Amelia emerged from the washroom, she was dressed in a simple calico dress that hung loosely on her slender frame. Her damp hair was combed back from her face, revealing the full extent of her injuries in the lamplight scrapes and cuts marred her cheeks and forehead, and her hands were raw and bleeding. The bath helped, she said, though her movements were still stiff and careful. But I fear I've ruined your clean water with all the dirt and blood. Water can be replaced, Miles said, gesturing for her to sit in the chair beside him. May I? He asked, holding up a cloth soaked in alcohol Amelia nodded, bracing herself. She flinched, but made no sound as he began cleaning the wounds on her face and hands. Miles worked methodically, his touch gentle despite his calloused fingers. "These aren't too deep," he commented as he applied salve to a particularly angry abrasion on her cheek. "The ones on your hands will take longer to heal, I'm afraid." "A schoolteacher with bandaged hands," Amelia said with a weak smile. "I'll make quite the first impression." "You'll make an impression regardless," Miles said, his eyes meeting hers briefly before returning to his task. Not many would stand up to Cavendish on their first day in town. When he'd finished with her visible injuries, Miles hesitated. "I need to check your back and, anywhere else you might have been hurt." Amelia's cheeks flushed. "My back took the worst of it, I think, and my legs." She turned in the chair, presenting her back to him and lifting her hair out of the way. Miles carefully rolled up the back of the borrowed dress, revealing angry red welts and scrapes across her shoulder blades and spine. He drew in a sharp breath at the extent of the damage. "This will sting," he warned before beginning to clean the wounds. Amelia gripped the edges of the chair but remained silent as he worked. Miles found himself admiring her fortitude even as his anger toward Cavendish and his men grew. Why does Cavendish want a private tutor for his son so badly? Miles asked as he bandaged the worst of the lacerations on her back. Amelia sighed. "His son Thomas has difficulties with reading and numbers. Cavendish doesn't want him ridiculed by other children, but I suspect it's more about his own pride than concern for Thomas. You've met the boy." "Briefly when I arrived yesterday. He seemed sweet if shy, nothing like his father." Miles nodded. "Thomas takes after his mother. She was a kind woman, died in childbirth with their second child who didn't survive either." "That's terrible," Amelia said softly. "Perhaps that explains some of Cavendish's bitterness, though it doesn't excuse his actions." "Nothing excuses what he did to you today," Miles said firmly, rolling her dress back down. "All finished. How do your legs feel? Can you walk comfortably? They're sore but manageable." "Thank you, Mr. Grayson." "Miles, please." "Miles," she repeated with a smile that transformed her face despite her injuries. "And you must call me Amelia." A knock at the door interrupted them. Hank entered, his expression grave. "Jack found the lady's horse, boss. She's in the stable now, but there's something else." Riders were spotted heading this way from town, 6 of them. Miles stood immediately. "Cavendish's men, looks that way." Amelia rose shakily to her feet. "I should go. I don't want to bring trouble to your home." "You're not going anywhere," Miles said firmly. "Hank, get the men ready. I want a show of force, but no shooting unless they start it." "Yes, sir," Hank replied, hurrying out. Miles moved to a cabinet, withdrawing a rifle and checking it was loaded. "Stay inside, Amelia, whatever happens." "I won't hide while men fight over me," she protested. "They're not fighting over you," Miles corrected her. "They're fighting over whether a man can treat another human being like property. It's a fight I was having with Cavendish long before you arrived." Before Amelia could argue further, the sound of horses approaching echoed from outside. Miles stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand but not raised. Amelia, despite his instructions, followed him but remained in the doorway. 6 riders approached the house, but stopped a respectful distance away when they saw Miles and his ranch hands positioned strategically around the property, all armed. "Evening, Grayson," called the lead rider, a burly man with a thick mustache whom Amelia recognized as one of those who had ambushed her. "We've come for the schoolteacher. Mr. Cavendish has unfinished business with her." "The lady is under my protection, Barton," Miles replied, his voice carrying easily in the still evening air. "Any business with her goes through me." Barton spat on the ground. "This ain't your concern, rancher. The woman disrespected Mr. Cavendish, and he aims to teach her some manners." "Seems to me you already tried that approach," Miles said coldly. "Dragging a woman behind a horse isn't teaching manners, it's attempted murder." "We was just having some fun," another rider called out. "She ain't even hurt bad." "Fun," Miles repeated, his knuckles whitening on the rifle. "Is that what you call it?" Amelia stepped forward, ignoring Miles' warning glance. Her voice, though shaking slightly, carried clearly to the mounted men. "If Mr. Cavendish wishes to discuss my employment, he can meet me at the schoolhouse tomorrow like a civilized man." I won't be intimidated by thugs. Barton's face darkened with anger. You've got a smart mouth, schoolteacher. Mr. Cavendish doesn't like smart-mouthed women. Fortunately, what Mr. Cavendish likes is of no concern to me, Amelia retorted. Miles moved slightly, positioning himself between Amelia and the riders. You've delivered your message, now get off my land. This ain't over, Grayson, Barton warned. Mr. Cavendish doesn't take kindly to interference. Neither do I, Miles replied evenly. And unlike Cavendish, I don't need to send 6 men to deliver a message. Now ride out before my hospitality expires. For a tense moment, it seemed Barton might challenge him. Then he glanced around at the ranch hands, all with weapons ready, and apparently thought better of it. We'll be seeing you, schoolteacher, he called to Amelia before wheeling his horse around. The riders departed at a trot, dust rising behind them in the gathering darkness. Miles waited until they were well away before lowering his rifle. That was foolish, he told Amelia, though there was a hint of admiration in his voice. Standing up to men like that. Should I cower instead? She asked, her chin lifting defiantly despite the pain evident in her eyes. Miles found himself smiling. No, I don't suppose that's in your nature. Not particularly, she agreed, swaying slightly as the adrenaline began to fade, leaving her exhausted and hurting. Miles caught her elbow, steadying her. You need rest. We can figure out what to do about Cavendish in the morning. He led her to a small bedroom off the main living area. You can sleep here tonight. I'll be just down the hall if you need anything. Thank you, Amelia said, suddenly overwhelmed by his kindness. For everything. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along when you did. Get some rest, Miles said gently. You're safe here. As he closed the door behind him, Miles found himself troubled by an unfamiliar feeling. It had been years since he'd felt the need to protect someone, not since his sister had died of fever 5 years earlier. Yet something about Amelia Calloway stirred protective instincts he'd thought long buried. He checked with his men, setting up a rotation of guards for the night, though he doubted Cavendish's men would return so soon. Then he retired to his own room, his thoughts filled with auburn hair and determined green eyes that somehow managed to look both vulnerable and fierce at once. Morning came with golden light streaming through the windows and the smell of coffee and bacon wafting through the house. Amelia woke stiff and sore, every scrape and bruise making itself known as she carefully rose from the bed. She found clean water in a basin and did her best to make herself presentable before venturing out. Miles was at the stove when she entered the kitchen, his back to her as he flipped bacon in a cast iron skillet. He turned at the sound of her footsteps, and Amelia was struck by how different he looked in the daylight. Last night, focused on her pain and the danger, she hadn't fully registered his appearance. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and a strong jaw shadowed with stubble. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, deep blue and thoughtful, with lines at the corners that suggested he smiled often, though his expression now was concerned as he assessed her condition. "How are you feeling?" he asked, setting aside the spatula. "Like I've been dragged behind a horse," Amelia replied with a wry smile, "but better than I might have expected, thanks to your care." Miles nodded, seeming relieved. "Hungry? I'm not much of a cook, but I can manage bacon and eggs without burning them, most days." "It smells wonderful," Amelia said, taking a seat at the small wooden table. "Is there anything I can do to help? Just sit and rest," Miles instructed, turning back to the stove. "You've earned it." As they ate breakfast, Miles outlined his plan. "I'll take you into town and see you safely to the schoolhouse. The town council should be informed of what Cavendish did." Amelia set down her fork. "Do you think they'll care, if Cavendish is as powerful as you say?" "Some will care," Miles assured her. "Cavendish has money and influence, but he doesn't own everyone. Besides, the town specifically hired a teacher from back east. They won't take kindly to him driving you away before you've taught a single lesson." "And if he tries something else?" Amelia asked quietly. Miles met her gaze steadily. "Then he'll answer to me." There was something in the way he said it, not boastful or threatening, just a simple statement of fact that made Amelia believe him. After breakfast, Miles brought Penny, her mare, around to the front of the house. The horse seemed calm now, showing no signs of the panic that had gripped her the day before. Jack has a way with horses, Miles explained as he helped Amelia mount, careful of her injuries. He spent some time with her last night getting her used to the stable. I should thank him, Amelia said, patting the mare's neck. You'll have plenty of opportunity. Jack's son will be one of your students. Miles mounted his own horse, and they set off toward Hill City at a gentle pace, mindful of Amelia's sore body. The morning was beautiful, with wildflowers dotting the prairie and a light breeze carrying the scent of sage. It's different in the daylight, Amelia observed, looking around at the rolling landscape. When I arrived yesterday, I was too nervous to appreciate the beauty. It grows on you, Miles agreed. I came here after the war, looking for somewhere quiet to heal, never intended to stay, but he gestured to the open country around them. It gets in your blood. How did you end up with a ranch? Amelia asked, curious about the man who had saved her. Won it in a poker game, Miles admitted with a grin. Previous owner was more fond of cards than cattle. Place was run down when I got it, but I had time and not much else to do. You've done well with it, Amelia said, thinking of the well-maintained buildings and healthy livestock she'd seen. I've been lucky, Miles said modestly. Had good men willing to work hard, and the land has been kind most years. As they approached Hill City, Amelia felt her anxiety rising. What if Cavendish was waiting? What if the parents didn't want their children taught by a woman who'd already caused trouble? Miles seemed to sense her worry. The school board chairman is a friend of mine, Walter Jenkins. He's a fair man. Once he hears what happened, he'll stand with you. The small town came into view, a main street lined with false-fronted buildings, a church with a modest steeple, and at the far end, a new-looking schoolhouse with a bell tower. People stopped to stare as Miles and Amelia rode past, their gazes lingering on Amelia's visible injuries. Miles led her directly to a two-story building with a sign proclaiming Jenkins General Store and Post Office. He dismounted and helped Amelia down, then tied their horses to the hitching post. Walter will be inside, he explained, offering his arm for support as they climbed the steps. The store was busy with morning customers, but conversation died as they entered. Walter Jenkins, a portly man with kind eyes and mutton chop whiskers, hurried forward. Miles, good to see you, my friend, and you must be Miss Calloway, our new teacher. His welcoming smile faltered as he took in her bandaged hands and the scrapes on her face. Good heavens, what happened to you? Perhaps we could speak privately, Walter, Miles suggested, nodding toward the curious onlookers. Of course, this way. Walter led them to a small office at the back of the store, closing the door behind them. Now then, what's this about? Miles gestured for Amelia to explain, which she did concisely, detailing her encounter with Cavendish's offer and the subsequent attack. Walter's expression darkened as she spoke. Disgraceful, he muttered when she finished. Absolutely disgraceful. Rest assured, Miss Calloway, the school board stands behind you completely. Cavendish has been trying to control this town for too long. He's a powerful enemy to make, Amelia said carefully. Walter sighed. Indeed he is. But education isn't a luxury for the wealthy, it's a necessity for all our children. That's why we hired you. I still intend to begin teaching today, Amelia told him firmly. If the children come, they'll come, Walter assured her. I'll see to it personally, and as for your safety. He glanced at Miles. I'll escort Miss Calloway to and from the schoolhouse until this situation is resolved, Miles said without hesitation. Walter nodded, seeming relieved. Good. I'll call an emergency meeting of the town council this afternoon. This has gone too far. As they left the store, Amelia touched Miles' arm. You don't need to escort me every day. You have a ranch to run. My foreman is perfectly capable of handling things for a few days, Miles replied. Besides, I owe Cavendish a reckoning for past grievances. This just moves up the timeline. I don't want to be the cause of violence, Amelia said worriedly. Miles' expression softened. There are ways to fight men like Cavendish without bloodshed. Sometimes all it takes is enough people standing together. They continued to the schoolhouse, where Amelia used her key to unlock the door. Inside, the single room was clean and bright, with rows of new desks facing a larger teacher's desk on a small platform. A blackboard covered most of one wall, and shelves held a modest collection of books. "It's perfect," Amelia breathed, momentarily forgetting her injuries as she took in what would be her domain. Miles watched her, struck by the transformation in her face as excitement overcame pain and worry. There was something captivating about her passion for teaching, about the way she immediately began organizing books and checking the chalk supply despite her bandaged hands. "I should let you prepare," he said after a few minutes. "What time do classes end?" 3 o'clock, Amelia replied, looking up from the lesson book she was reviewing. "I'll be here at 3 then," Miles promised. "Try not to worry about Cavendish today. Focus on the children." After Miles left, Amelia busied herself with final preparations, writing her name on the blackboard and organizing the primers she would use for different age groups. Despite her determination to concentrate on teaching, her thoughts kept straying to the rancher who had saved her. There was something about Miles Grayson that intrigued her, a quiet strength combined with unexpected gentleness. She'd encountered few men like him back east, where polished manners often concealed selfish natures. Miles seemed to be the opposite, rough on the surface, but with a core of genuine kindness. The school bell rang at 8 o'clock, and to Amelia's relief, children began filing in almost immediately. They ranged in age from 6 to 14, some dressed neatly in their best clothes, others in practical work clothes that had seen better days. All eyed her curiously, their gazes lingering on her injuries. A small boy with red hair and freckles raised his hand before she'd even begun the lesson. "Miss, did you fight a bear?" The question broke the tension, and Amelia found herself laughing despite her sore ribs. "No, I had an accident with a horse, but I'm quite all right now, thank you for asking." She was about to begin her welcome speech when the door opened again, and a thin boy of about 10 entered hesitantly. He had dark hair and serious eyes that seemed too old for his young face. "Thomas Cavendish," he introduced himself formally. "I apologize for being late, Miss Calloway." Amelia felt a moment of surprise, followed by determination not to let the father's sins color her treatment of the son. "You're right on time, Thomas. Please take a seat." As the day progressed, Amelia found herself increasingly impressed by her students. Despite the limited educational opportunities in Hill City, many showed a genuine thirst for knowledge. Thomas Cavendish, in particular, proved to be bright and eager to learn, though he struggled with reading as she'd been told. During the noon recess, while the other children played outside under the supervision of an older student, Thomas lingered at his desk, carefully copying letters from the primer. "You don't need to spend your entire break studying, Thomas," Amelia told him gently. "It's important to play as well as learn." Thomas looked up, his expression solemn. "Father says I must improve my reading or he'll be disappointed in me." Something in the boy's tone, a resignation beyond his years, touched Amelia's heart. "Learning takes time," she said, sitting beside him. "Some of the greatest minds struggled with reading at first. It doesn't mean you're not intelligent." "Father says a Cavendish should be the best at everything," Thomas replied, his small shoulders hunched. "Your father wants what's best for you," Amelia said diplomatically, though she had her doubts. "But I want you to enjoy learning, not fear it. Perhaps we could find books about subjects that interest you." "What do you like, Thomas?" "Horses," he answered immediately, his eyes lighting up. "And maps. I like knowing where places are." "Then we'll start there," Amelia promised. "Now go outside and play for a while. The fresh air will help clear your mind for this afternoon's lessons." As promised, Miles arrived at 3 o'clock, just as the children were leaving. Several of the boys stared at him with undisguised admiration. As they passed, the tall rancher with his gun belt and weathered hat was evidently an impressive figure to young boys dreaming of adventure. "How was your first day?" Miles asked as he entered the schoolhouse, where Amelia was erasing the blackboard. "Better than I expected," she admitted. "The children are wonderful, even Thomas Cavendish." Miles raised an eyebrow. "He came to school. I'm surprised Cavendish allowed it after what happened." "Perhaps he doesn't know," Amelia suggested. "Thomas seems desperate to please his father, but also genuinely interested in learning." "The boy's nothing like Cavendish," Miles agreed. "Sarah, his mother, was well educated. She used to read poetry aloud at town gatherings before she died." Amelia set down the eraser, wincing as the motion pulled at the wounds on her back. It's sad. Thomas clearly has a good mind, but his father's expectations are crushing him. Miles noticed her discomfort. Your injuries are paining you. Let me help with that board. I can manage, Amelia protested, but Miles was already taking the eraser from her hands. Stubbornness will only slow your healing, he chided gently. Besides, I spent enough time staring at blackboards in my youth to know how to clean one properly. As Miles finished erasing the day's lessons, Walter Jenkins arrived, his round face flushed with exertion from the brisk walk. Miss Calloway, how was your first day? The children behaved themselves, I hope. They were exemplary, Amelia assured him. I couldn't have asked for better students. Walter beamed with pride, as if personally responsible for the children's good behavior. Excellent, excellent. Now, about the council meeting this afternoon. We'd like you both to attend if possible. 4 o'clock at the town hall. Miles glanced at Amelia. Are you up to it? You've had a long day. I'll manage, she said firmly. This concerns my future here after all. The town hall was actually the church basement, hastily arranged with chairs and a table for the council members. When Miles and Amelia entered, the room was already crowded with townspeople, their expressions ranging from curious to concerned. Walter Jenkins presided over the meeting, calling for order with a small wooden gavel. As you all know, we're here to discuss a serious incident involving our new schoolteacher, Miss Calloway, and certain elements in our community. Amelia was asked to recount her experience, which she did clearly and without embellishment, though she felt herself trembling slightly at the memory. Miles stood beside her, a reassuring presence at her shoulder. When she finished, a murmur ran through the crowd. An older woman near the front stood up. My grandson said the teacher had been in a fight with a bear. Is this why you're all bandaged up, Miss Calloway? I'm afraid the bear story is more exciting than the truth, Mrs. Peterson, Amelia replied with a small smile. But yes, these injuries were from being dragged behind my horse. A man in a shopkeeper's apron rose next. Are you saying Darius Cavendish ordered this done to you? That's a serious accusation. His men made it clear they were acting on his behalf, Amelia said carefully. Whether he specifically ordered them to drag me behind a horse, I cannot say. This isn't the first time Cavendish's men have overstepped, called another voice from the back. Remember what happened to Peterson's North Pasture when he refused to sell? More voices joined in, relating incidents of intimidation and property damage. Miles listened silently, his expression grim but unsurprised. Walter rapped his gavel for order. The question before us is what to do about this situation. Miss Calloway was hired by this town to educate our children. If she cannot do so safely, we have failed in our duty. What about the sheriff? Someone suggested. Can't he arrest these men? Walter exchanged glances with Miles. Sheriff Bryant is currently indisposed. His deputy is inexperienced and, frankly, afraid of crossing Cavendish. So we do nothing, asked a woman holding a baby. Let them drive away our teacher before she's had a chance to do what we brought her here for. Not nothing, Walter replied firmly. I propose we form a town committee for Miss Calloway's protection. Volunteers to escort her to and from the schoolhouse to ensure her safety while she's in town. I've already volunteered for that duty, Miles spoke up, but having others involved would send a stronger message. One by one, men and women stepped forward to offer their support: storekeepers, farmers, the blacksmith, even the town doctor. Amelia felt tears pricking her eyes at their willingness to stand with her, a stranger they barely knew. It seems we have our committee, Walter said, looking pleased. Now, about approaching Cavendish directly. The door at the back of the room crashed open, interrupting the discussion. Darius Cavendish himself strode in, flanked by Barton and another of his men. He was a tall, imposing figure with silver at his temples and cold eyes that surveyed the room with contempt. Approaching me about what, Jenkins? He demanded, his voice carrying easily through the suddenly silent room. Planning some sort of uprising in my town. Walter stood straighter, though he was a head shorter than Cavendish. This meeting concerns town business, Mr. Cavendish. You're welcome to join us civilly. Cavendish's gaze found Amelia, standing near the front with Miles. His eyes narrowed as he took in her bandaged hands and the visible scrapes on her face. "So this is about the schoolteacher," he said, his voice deceptively soft. "The one who thinks she knows better than me what's best for my son." "This is about upholding the law in Hill City," Walter corrected him. "Miss Calloway was hired to teach all the children. Your son is welcome in her classroom, but she cannot abandon her duties to the other students. And if I decide Hill City doesn't need a schoolteacher after all?" Cavendish asked, his tone making it clear this was no idle threat. Miles stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Amelia. "Hill City isn't yours to decide for, Cavendish. These people hired Miss Calloway because they want their children educated. Your quarrel is with me, not her." Cavendish's laugh was cold. "My quarrel is with anyone who defies me, Grayson. You should know that by now." "Is that why you had your men drag Miss Calloway behind a horse?" Miles asked, his voice deadly quiet, "to teach her about defiance?" "I heard the schoolteacher had an unfortunate accident," Cavendish replied smoothly. "My men merely reported it to me." "That's a lie," Amelia said, moving to stand beside Miles rather than behind him. "Your men caused the accident deliberately after I declined your offer to teach Thomas privately." Cavendish's face hardened. "Be careful with your accusations, Miss Calloway. Frontier life can be dangerous for a woman alone." "She's not alone," Miles stated flatly. "None of us are." "That's what you've never understood, Cavendish. A town isn't just buildings and businesses, it's people who look out for each other." A murmur of agreement rose from the gathered townspeople. Cavendish looked around, seeming to truly notice for the first time how many were present and the unified opposition he faced. "This isn't over," he said finally, his gaze returning to Amelia. "My son deserves better than a common schoolroom with farmers' brats." "Your son deserves the chance to make friends his own age and learn alongside his neighbors," Amelia replied, meeting his stare without flinching. "If you truly want what's best for Thomas, you'll let him continue attending school." Something flickered in Cavendish's eyes, surprise, perhaps, at her boldness or a grudging recognition of her point about his son. Without another word, he turned and stalked out, his men following. The tension in the room broke as the door closed behind them. Walter wiped his brow with a handkerchief. "Well, that was bracing. I believe we've made our position clear, at least." "He won't give up so easily," Miles warned. "Cavendish isn't used to being opposed publicly. He'll look for another way to get what he wants." "Then we'll be vigilant," Walter declared. "The protection committee will begin immediately. Miles, you'll coordinate the schedule." Miles nodded. "I'll arrange for Miss Calloway to stay at my ranch until things calm down. It's more defensible than the teacher's quarters in town." Amelia opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again. The truth was, she didn't relish the idea of staying alone after what had happened, and Miles' ranch had already proven to be a sanctuary. The meeting concluded with practical arrangements: who would escort Amelia when, how messages would be relayed if trouble arose. Throughout it all, Amelia was struck by the community's determination to protect her, a newcomer they'd only just met. As they rode back to the ranch that evening, the setting sun painting the prairie in gold and purple, Amelia voiced this thought to Miles. "Why are they all willing to help me? They don't know me." Miles considered the question for a moment. "It's not just about you, though I think they admired your courage in coming to the meeting despite your injuries. It's about Cavendish. He's pushed these people for years, taking a little more control each time, testing how far he can go. You might have been the spark, but the kindling was already laid. Still, it's a risk they're taking, for a schoolteacher they just hired. Education matters out here," Miles said simply. "Many of these people grew up with limited schooling themselves. They want better for their children." They rode in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the steady rhythm of hooves and the evening calls of birds settling for the night. "What's your quarrel with Cavendish?" Amelia asked eventually, remembering what Miles had said at the meeting. "He seemed to have a particular dislike for you." Miles' expression tightened. 3 years ago, there was a drought. Cavendish tried to buy the water rights to the creek that runs through my property. It's one of the few that didn't dry up that year. When I refused to sell, his men paid me a visit similar to yours. They dragged you behind a horse, Amelia asked, horrified. Not quite. They preferred more direct methods. Miles' hand unconsciously moved to his back, where Amelia remembered seeing scars when he'd reached up to take something from a high shelf the previous evening. But the result was the same: a message that Cavendish gets what he wants. Yet you kept your water rights, Miles nodded. The drought ended before he could press the issue further, and other matters distracted him. But he's never forgotten that I defied him. And now you've done it again for my sake, Amelia said softly. Miles glanced at her, his eyes reflecting the golden light of sunset. Some things are worth standing for, Amelia. You are one of them. The simple statement, delivered without flourish or expectation, touched Amelia deeply. In the days that followed, as she settled into teaching at the schoolhouse and recovering at Miles' ranch, those words often returned to her. True to Walter's plan, different townspeople escorted Amelia to and from school each day, though Miles was almost always among them. The children quickly adapted to their teachers' temporary living arrangements, and Amelia found herself enjoying the rhythm of ranch life, the pre-dawn quiet, the simple but hearty meals, the sense of purpose that infused every task. To her surprise, Thomas Cavendish continued to attend school regularly, arriving each morning on a pony led by a ranch hand who never entered the schoolhouse but waited patiently outside until dismissal time. The boy thrived under Amelia's attention, particularly when she introduced maps and geography lessons that captured his imagination. Miles, for his part, found himself increasingly drawn to the schoolteacher. He admired her resilience, the way she refused to let her injuries or Cavendish's threats deter her from teaching. He enjoyed their evening conversations by the fireplace, discovering her sharp mind and surprising humor. And he found himself noticing small details, the way sunlight caught in her auburn hair, how her eyes crinkled at the corners when she smiled, the gentle way she spoke with his ranch hand's children when they visited. 2 weeks after the incident, Amelia's physical wounds had largely healed, though she still moved carefully at times. She sat on the porch of Miles' ranch house one evening, grading student essays while the sun set in a spectacular display of orange and crimson. Miles joined her, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "How are they doing?" he asked, nodding toward the papers. "Remarkably well," Amelia replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Thomas wrote an excellent essay about the Oregon Trail. He has a real gift for detail, and the others." Progressing at their own pace, Sally Jenkins has a poet's soul. Jacob Miller could be a mathematician if he had the right books. Miles smiled at her enthusiasm. "You've made quite an impression in a short time." "They make it easy to love teaching," Amelia said, setting the papers aside. "Even with everything else happening, the classroom feels like exactly where I'm meant to be." "Have you heard anything more from Cavendish?" Miles asked, his expression growing serious. Amelia shook her head. "Nothing direct. Thomas never mentions his father, and the ranch hand who brings him offers nothing beyond polite greetings. Cavendish is too quiet," Miles mused, looking out at the darkening landscape. "It's not like him to retreat so completely. Perhaps he's accepted the situation." Amelia suggested, though she didn't sound convinced. "Perhaps," Miles agreed, equally doubtful. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, sipping their coffee as the first stars appeared in the deepening blue of the sky. Amelia found herself aware of Miles' presence beside her, the subtle scent of leather and soap that always surrounded him, the steady rise and fall of his breathing, the warmth that seemed to radiate from him even without physical contact. "I should return to town soon," she said suddenly, surprising herself with the declaration. "I can't impose on your hospitality forever." Miles turned to look at her, his expression unreadable in the fading light. "You're not imposing. Having you here has been pleasant." "Even so, people will talk. A single woman staying with a bachelor rancher, it's hardly proper." "People always talk," Miles said dismissively. "But if you're concerned about propriety, Walter's wife has offered you a room in their home until the teachers' quarters are better secured." "You've discussed this with the Jenkinses?" Amelia asked, unsure whether to be touched by his concern or irritated by the presumption. "I discussed options," Miles clarified. "Your safety is still my primary concern, Amelia. Cavendish may be quiet, but I don't trust him." Before Amelia could respond, the sound of approaching horses drew their attention. Hank appeared from the direction of the bunkhouse, rifle in hand, moving to intercept the visitors. "Stay here," Miles instructed, rising to his feet and checking his sidearm before striding toward the yard. Amelia, of course, ignored this direction and followed at a discreet distance, ready to retreat if necessary, but unwilling to be left in ignorance of whatever was happening. To her surprise, the rider Hank was speaking with was Thomas Cavendish's usual escort, a lean man named Dawson who rarely spoke. Tonight, however, he was animated, gesturing urgently as he spoke to Hank. Miles approached them. "What's going on?" Dawson turned to him, removing his hat respectfully. "Mr. Grayson, sir, I've come about the boy Thomas." "What about him?" Miles asked sharply. "Is he hurt?" "Not hurt, sir, but might be soon. Mr. Cavendish has been drinking heavy since the town meeting." Tonight he started raging about the schoolteacher and how his son was being turned against him. Dawson glanced toward Amelia, who had moved closer despite Miles' instructions. He said he was going to send Thomas east to a proper boys' school where he wouldn't be filled with nonsense. "That's his right as the boy's father," Miles said, though his tone suggested he didn't approve. Dawson twisted his hat in his hands. "Yes, sir, but it's not just that. The boy heard him and ran off, said he wouldn't go east, that Miss Calloway was the only teacher who ever helped him feel smart." The man's voice lowered. "Mr. Cavendish hit him, sir. Not a normal disciplining, he struck the boy hard enough to knock him down. That's when Thomas ran." Amelia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Where is he now?" "Don't rightly know, madam. He took his pony and rode out." "Mr. Cavendish sent men searching, but—" Dawson hesitated. "But you came here instead," Miles finished for him. "Why? The boy talks about you, sir, and Miss Calloway, of course, thought he might head this way looking for help." Miles turned to Hank. "Get the men together. Thomas knows the way to the ranch, but he might have gotten lost, especially if he left after dark." "I'll come too," Amelia said firmly. Miles looked like he might object, then nodded. "If Thomas is frightened, seeing you might help. Hank, saddle Miss Calloway's mare." Within minutes, a search party had assembled. Miles divided the men into groups, assigning each a section of the land between the ranch and Cavendish's property. "He's 10 years old on a pony," Miles reminded them. "He can't have gotten far. Check every creek bed and stand of trees. He might be hiding if he thinks his father's men are after him." Amelia rode with Miles, their horses moving at a careful pace as they scanned the moonlit landscape. The night was clear, stars blazing overhead in the vast Dakota sky, but the terrain was treacherous in the dark pockets of loose stone, prairie dog holes, sudden dips in the land that could trip an unwary horse. "Thomas is a sensible boy," Amelia said as they rode, partly to reassure herself. "He won't do anything foolish." "He's also terrified," Miles replied grimly. "Fear makes people, even sensible ones, take risks they normally wouldn't." They had been searching for nearly an hour when a shout came from the direction of the creek that marked the boundary between Miles' property and Cavendish's land. Miles immediately turned his horse, Amelia following close behind. They found one of the ranch hands, Jack, standing beside his horse at the edge of a steep-sided gully through which the creek flowed. He pointed downward as they approached. "Thought I heard something down there, boss. Sounded like a child crying." Miles dismounted swiftly, retrieving a lantern from his saddlebag and lighting it. "Stay with the horses, Jack. Miss Calloway and I will check." The descent into the gully was treacherous, loose stones sliding beneath their boots as they picked their way down the steep bank. Miles went first, holding the lantern high with one hand and offering the other to Amelia for support. At the bottom, the creek gurgled softly over smooth stones, its banks lined with scrubby willows and cottonwoods. Miles raised the lantern, casting its light in a wide arc. "Thomas," he called, keeping his voice gentle. "It's Mr. Grayson from the ranch. Miss Calloway is with me. Are you down here, son?" A small sound came from behind a fallen log near the water's edge, not quite a word, more a stifled sob. Miles approached slowly, Amelia at his side. Thomas sat huddled against the log, his arms wrapped around his knees, face streaked with dirt and tears. His right cheek bore an angry red mark that would likely bruise by morning. The boy's pony was nowhere to be seen. "Thomas," Amelia said softly, kneeling beside him despite the damp ground. "We've been so worried about you." The boy looked up, his expression wary until he recognized them in the lantern light. Then his face crumpled and he launched himself into Amelia's arms, sobbing against her shoulder. "I won't go east," he cried between heaving breaths. "I won't. I'm learning to read with you. Father just doesn't understand." It's all right," Amelia soothed, holding him close. "No one is sending you anywhere tonight." Miles knelt beside them, setting the lantern on a flat rock. "What happened to your pony, Thomas?" The boy pulled back slightly, wiping his nose on his sleeve. "She got spooked by something and threw me. I hurt my ankle when I fell and she ran off." He gestured vaguely upstream. "I tried to follow her, but it was dark and my ankle hurts too much." Miles gently examined the boy's ankle, which was swollen but didn't appear broken. "A sprain, I think. We'll have the doctor check it to be sure." "Father will be so angry," Thomas whispered, fresh tears welling in his eyes. "About the pony and running away and everything." "Your father is worried about you," Amelia said, choosing her words carefully. "That sometimes makes people say and do things they don't mean." Thomas shook his head vehemently. "He meant it. He said you were filling my head with nonsense, making me soft. He said a real Cavendish wouldn't struggle with reading, that I was an embarrassment." His voice broke on the last word, and Amelia pulled him close again. Miles' expression darkened, but he kept his voice calm for the boy's sake. "Your father is wrong, Thomas. Every person learns differently. There's no shame in finding some subjects challenging." "That's what Miss Calloway says," Thomas said, his voice muffled against Amelia's shoulder. "She says my brain just works differently, not worse." "And she's right," Miles affirmed. "Now let's get you somewhere warm and dry." "Can you stand if I help you?" Thomas nodded, and Miles helped him to his feet, supporting him when he winced at putting weight on his injured ankle. Without hesitation, Miles lifted the boy into his arms. "I can carry you up," he said when Thomas looked embarrassed. "It's a steep climb, and we don't want that ankle getting worse." The ascent was more difficult with Miles carrying Thomas, but they managed, Amelia following carefully behind. Jack waited at the top with the horses, his weathered face breaking into a relieved smile when he saw the boy. "Found our lost lamb, I see," he said, helping Miles settle Thomas on his horse. "The others will be glad to hear it." Miles swung into the saddle behind Thomas, keeping one arm securely around the boy's waist. "Jack, ride ahead and let Hank know we found him. Have someone inform Cavendish that his son is safe at my ranch and will remain there until morning." "Yes, sir," Jack replied, mounting his own horse. "And Jack," Miles added, his voice hardening slightly, "make it clear that if Cavendish or his men show up tonight, they won't be welcome. The boy needs rest, not a confrontation." Jack nodded, understanding the implicit instruction, and rode off toward the ranch. Miles, with Thomas secure in front of him, turned to Amelia. "Ready?" she nodded, mounting her mare with practiced ease despite her lingering soreness. As they rode back to the ranch at a careful pace, mindful of Thomas's injury, Amelia found herself watching Miles the gentle way he held the exhausted boy, the soft reassurances he murmured when Thomas winced at the horse's movement. There was a tenderness in him that belied his rugged exterior, a capacity for nurturing she hadn't fully appreciated until now. Back at the ranch, Miles carried Thomas inside while Amelia hurried ahead to prepare a bed in the small room she had been using. By the time Miles laid the boy down, he was half asleep, the emotional and physical exhaustion of the night catching up with him. Amelia removed Thomas's boots and covered him with a quilt while Miles fetched water and clean cloths to wash the dirt from the boy's face and hands. "Should we send for the doctor tonight?" Amelia asked quietly as they stepped out of the room, leaving the door ajar. Miles shook his head. "The ankle's just sprained. It can wait until morning. He needs sleep more than anything right now." They moved to the kitchen where Hank had coffee brewing. The foreman poured cups for both of them, then tactfully withdrew to coordinate the return of the other search parties. "What will happen tomorrow?" Amelia asked, cradling her cup between her hands. "Cavendish won't simply let this go." "No, he won't," Miles agreed grimly, "but neither will I." "What that man did crosses a line, Amelia. Threatening you was bad enough, striking his own son hard enough to leave a mark like that. He shook his head, anger evident in the tightness of his jaw. What can we do? He's Thomas's father. He has rights. Rights, yes. But also responsibilities, Miles replied. The law may give him authority over Thomas, but it doesn't give him the right to abuse that authority. You're talking about challenging Darius Cavendish for custody of his son, Amelia said, realization dawning. Is that even possible? Not for me, Miles admitted. I'm a single man with no relation to the boy, but there are other options. Thomas has an Aunt Sarah's sister living in Denver. I've met her a few times when she visited before Sarah died. She never approved of Cavendish, but she stayed in touch for Thomas's sake. You'd send him away after all? Amelia asked, surprised. After he ran away specifically to avoid being sent east. Denver isn't away in the same sense, Miles explained. It's close enough that he could visit, continue his education with a teacher who understands him. And his aunt is family, not some distant boarding school where he'd be alone. Amelia considered this. We should talk to Thomas in the morning, see what he wants. He's old enough to have some say in his future. Agreed. Miles studied her over the rim of his coffee cup. You've grown attached to him. It wasn't a question, but Amelia answered anyway. He's a special child, bright, sensitive, eager to please. He deserves better than what he's getting from his father. And you deserve better than being caught in the middle of this feud, Miles said softly. I never meant for you to become a target for Cavendish's anger. I made my own choices, Amelia reminded him. The moment I refused his private tutoring offer, I set this in motion. Still, I've put you in danger by involving you further. Amelia reached across the table, her hand covering his. You saved my life, Miles. Whatever happens now, I don't regret any of it. The touch of her hand on his sent warmth spreading through Miles' chest. Before he could respond, a small sound from the doorway drew their attention. Thomas stood there, looking small and vulnerable in his rumpled clothes, tear tracks still visible on his face. I had a bad dream, he said simply. Amelia immediately rose and went to him. Would you like some warm milk to help you back to sleep? Thomas nodded, but his eyes were on Miles. Is my father coming here tonight? Miles joined them, kneeling to be at eye level with the boy. No, Thomas, you're staying here until morning where you're safe. We've let your father know where you are, so he won't worry. He'll be angry, Thomas said, his voice small. Probably, Miles agreed honestly. But that's for adults to deal with. Your job is to rest that ankle and get some sleep. While Amelia warmed milk on the stove, Miles sat with Thomas at the kitchen table, distracting him with stories of the ranch and the animals that lived on it. By the time the milk was ready, the boy's eyelids were drooping despite his efforts to stay awake. Can Miss Calloway read to me? He asked as Miles helped him back to bed. Just for a little while. Of course I can, Amelia said, selecting a book from the small shelf in the room. What would you like to hear? Anything about horses, Thomas replied, settling back against the pillows. Or adventures. Amelia chose a collection of Western tales, opening to a story about a legendary Mustang that roamed the plains. As she read, her voice soft and expressive, Thomas's eyes gradually closed despite his determination to stay awake. Miles leaned against the doorframe, watching them, the schoolteacher whose gentleness belied her inner strength, and the boy who had found in her the understanding his father couldn't provide. When Thomas was finally asleep, Amelia carefully closed the book and rose from her chair beside the bed. She and Miles stepped into the hallway, closing the door partially behind them. He's exhausted, poor thing, Amelia whispered. Miles nodded, his expression troubled. Tomorrow won't be easy. Cavendish will come for him and he'll be furious. We'll face that when it comes, Amelia said firmly. For tonight, at least, Thomas is safe. They said goodnight soon after, each retreating to their rooms, Amelia to the small guest room where she'd been sleeping since arriving at the ranch, Miles to the master bedroom down the hall. But sleep eluded them both, their minds filled with concerns about what the morning would bring. Dawn came with a clear sky promising another hot day. Miles rose early, as was his habit, and found Amelia already in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair loosely braided over one shoulder, and the sight of her moving comfortably in his home stirred something in him he wasn't quite ready to examine. "Thomas is still sleeping," she reported, glancing up from the stove where bacon sizzled in a pan. "I checked on him a few minutes ago." "Let him rest," Miles agreed. "He had a difficult night." They ate breakfast quietly, discussing what approach to take when Cavendish inevitably arrived. They had just finished when Hank appeared at the door, his expression grim. "Riders coming, boss." "Cavendish himself and about 10 men." Miles nodded, having expected nothing less. "Get the men ready, but no weapons unless absolutely necessary. I want to resolve this peacefully if possible." "Yes, sir," Hank replied, though he looked doubtful. "Should I wake Thomas?" Amelia asked as Hank left. Miles considered the question. "Not yet. Let's see what Cavendish has to say first. No sense frightening the boy if we can avoid it." They moved to the porch together, watching as the group of riders approached the ranch house. Darius Cavendish led them, his face set in hard lines, a rifle resting across his saddle. Behind him rode Barton and the other men who had threatened Amelia, along with several ranch hands Miles didn't recognize. The group halted in the yard, dust swirling around the horses' hooves. Cavendish's cold gaze took in Miles and Amelia standing side by side on the porch. "Where's my son, Grayson?" he demanded without preamble. "Safe," Miles replied evenly. "Which is more than I could say if he'd stayed with you last night." Cavendish's face darkened. "You have no right to keep him from me. He's my son, my blood." "Being your blood didn't stop you from striking him hard enough to leave a mark," Miles said, his voice controlled but edged with anger. "Or from frightening him so badly he ran away in the dark." "How I discipline my son is none of your concern," Cavendish spat. Amelia stepped forward. "It becomes our concern when he arrives on our doorstep bruised and terrified. What kind of father makes his child that afraid?" Cavendish's gaze shifted to her, his expression contemptuous. "This is your doing, schoolteacher," filling his head with ideas above his station, making him question his place. "His place is not to be your punching bag when he struggles with reading," Amelia retorted, her fear of this man forgotten in her anger on Thomas's behalf. "He's a bright, capable boy who needs patience and understanding, not threats and violence." "Enough," Cavendish barked. "I came for my son, not a lecture from a woman who should have left town when she had the chance." Miles moved slightly, positioning himself between Amelia and Cavendish. "Thomas stays here until we're satisfied he won't be harmed. That's non-negotiable." Cavendish's hand tightened on his rifle. "You're forgetting who I am, Grayson. One word from me and your precious ranch becomes worthless. No one will sell to you, buy from you, or work for you." "You overestimate your influence," Miles replied calmly. "The town's opinion of you has been slipping for years. After what you did to Miss Calloway, and now your own son, you'll find fewer people willing to do your bidding." As if on cue, the sound of approaching horses drew everyone's attention. Walter Jenkins appeared at the head of a group of townspeople: the doctor, the blacksmith, several farmers, and even the nervous deputy sheriff, all armed and determined looking. "Heard there might be trouble, Miles," Walter called as they rode into the yard. "Thought we'd stop by for coffee." Cavendish's face registered shock, then fury. "What is this? A revolt?" "This is community, Darius," Walter replied, dismounting heavily. "Something you've never understood. When one of our own is threatened, we stand together." "The schoolteacher isn't one of your own," Cavendish sneered. "She's been here less than a month." "Time doesn't matter," the doctor spoke up. "She's teaching our children, caring for them. That makes her one of us." "And Thomas," Miles asked quietly, "is he one of us too, or just your property?" Before Cavendish could answer, the door behind Miles and Amelia opened and Thomas appeared, his face pale but determined despite his slight limp. "Father," he said, his voice small but steady. Cavendish's expression softened fractionally at the sight of his son. "Thomas, get your things." "We're going home." Thomas shook his head, moving to stand between Miles and Amelia. "I don't want to go home, not if it means leaving school and Miss Calloway." "This isn't a negotiation, boy," Cavendish said, his voice hardening again. "You're my son, and you'll do as I say." "Or you'll hit me again?" Thomas asked, with a courage that made Amelia's heart ache. "Like you hit Mother when she tried to stop you sending away my tutor?" A shocked murmur ran through the assembled townspeople. Cavendish's face went white, then red with fury. You watch your tongue, boy. You know nothing about what happened between your mother and me. I know she wanted me to learn to have choices, Thomas replied, and I know she was afraid of you, just like I am. Miles placed a gentle hand on Thomas's shoulder. No one's forcing you to go anywhere today, Thomas. We have options. What options? Cavendish demanded. He's my son legally and by blood. Aunt Rebecca, Thomas said suddenly. Mother always said I could go to Aunt Rebecca if. He trailed off, unwilling to finish the thought. If things got bad, Miles completed for him. Sarah made arrangements with her sister before she died. She foresaw this day might come, Cavendish. Cavendish's expression flickered with uncertainty for the first time. Rebecca has no claim on my son. Perhaps not legally, the deputy sheriff spoke up, surprising everyone. But I reckon a judge might take interest in that bruise on the boy's face and what he has to say about how he got it. You wouldn't dare, Cavendish hissed. The deputy straightened in his saddle. I took an oath to uphold the law, Mr. Cavendish. That includes protecting those who can't protect themselves. A tense silence fell over the gathering. Cavendish looked from face to face, seeming to realize for the first time that he had lost the absolute control he once wielded over Hill City. His gaze finally settled on his son, standing tall despite his fear. Thomas, he said, his voice softer now, almost pleading, you're a Cavendish. Your place is with me, learning to run the ranch that will one day be yours. I can still learn that, Thomas replied carefully. But I need to learn reading and numbers too. Miss Calloway helps me understand when you just get angry. Cavendish's shoulders sagged slightly, a defeat he would never acknowledge aloud written in the lines of his body. What do you propose, Grayson? He asked finally. Since you and the schoolteacher seem to have appointed yourselves my son's guardians. Miles glanced at Amelia, then at Thomas, before responding. Thomas stays in school in Hill City. No more talk of sending him east. He continues living with you, but if there's another incident like last night, any incident where he's harmed or threatened, he goes to his aunt in Denver, with or without your consent. And who decides what constitutes harm? Cavendish demanded. The doctor, Miles said firmly, and Thomas himself. Cavendish looked like he might argue further, but something in the unified stance of the townspeople seemed to give him pause. Finally, he nodded curtly. He can continue at the school, but he remains my son under my roof. With regular visits to check on his welfare, Amelia added, unwilling to leave Thomas completely at his father's mercy. Cavendish's jaw tightened, but he nodded again. Fine. Are we finished here? Miles looked to Thomas. Are you willing to go home with your father with these conditions in place? Thomas hesitated, then nodded slowly. If I can still come to school and if, he glanced at Amelia, if Miss Calloway can still teach me special lessons for my reading. Of course I can, Amelia assured him. We'll arrange extra sessions after regular school hours. Then it's settled, Miles said, his gaze returning to Cavendish. Thomas returns home with you today, continues school with Miss Calloway, and there will be no reprisals against anyone involved in this matter. Cavendish's expression was cold, but he inclined his head in reluctant agreement. Get your things, Thomas. We're leaving. I'll help you, Amelia offered, guiding the boy back inside with a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Once they were alone in the small bedroom, Thomas looked up at her anxiously. He'll be angry when we're alone. No, he won't, Amelia said firmly, because he knows that if he hurts you again, you'll be sent to Denver, and he doesn't want that. You promise you won't let him send me away? Thomas asked, his voice small. Amelia knelt to be at his eye level. I promise I'll do everything in my power to keep you safe and in school where you belong. Mr. Grayson promises too, and so do all those people outside. Thomas nodded, seeming reassured. He gathered his few belongings while Amelia waited, then took her hand as they returned to the porch where the confrontation had now dissolved into smaller conversations among the townspeople. The doctor approached Thomas immediately. Let's have a look at that ankle before you go, young man. While the doctor examined Thomas, pronouncing the sprain mild and wrapping it properly, Miles moved to Amelia's side. You were magnificent, he said quietly, standing up to Cavendish like that. So were you, she replied, equally soft. And Thomas, I never expected such courage from him. Children often surprise us with their resilience, Miles observed. especially when they have something worth fighting for. Their eyes met, a moment of understanding passing between them that went beyond words. Then Thomas was approaching, his ankle freshly bandaged, a tentative smile on his face. "Thank you for finding me last night," he said, "and for the story." "You're welcome anytime," Amelia told him warmly. "I'll see you at school tomorrow." Thomas nodded, then surprised them both by hugging first Amelia, then Miles, before limping toward his father's horse. Cavendish, watching this exchange with an unreadable expression, mounted and then reached down to help Thomas up behind him. "This isn't over, Grayson," he said, his voice too low for the others to hear. Miles met his gaze steadily. "For your son's sake, I hope it is." Without another word, Cavendish turned his horse and rode out, his men following. The townspeople remained, however, gathering around Miles and Amelia with expressions ranging from concern to admiration. "That was a brave thing you did," Walter told them. "Standing up to Cavendish like that." "It was necessary," Amelia replied simply. The doctor nodded approvingly. "The boy will be fine physically. That sprain will heal in a couple of weeks. As for the rest," he shrugged. "Children are resilient, as you said, Miles. With continued support from Miss Calloway and the community, he'll recover from his father's harshness too." As the impromptu gathering dispersed, Walter hung back to speak privately with Miles and Amelia. "Cavendish won't take this defeat lightly," he warned. "He may have agreed to our terms today, but he'll look for ways to reassert his control." "We'll be vigilant," Miles assured him. "And if necessary, we'll follow through on the contingency plan with Thomas's aunt." Walter nodded, then glanced between them with a knowing look. "You two make quite a team. The whole town's talking about it, you know." Amelia felt her cheeks warm. "We're just trying to help a child in need." Of course," Walter agreed, his expression innocently bland. "Well, I should be getting back to the store. Sarah will want a full account of what happened." After Walter left, Miles and Amelia found themselves alone on the porch, the morning's excitement giving way to a quieter, more personal tension. "I should return to town today," Amelia said after a moment. "The immediate danger seems to have passed, and I've imposed on your hospitality long enough." Miles turned to face her fully. "It's not an imposition, Amelia, having you here." He paused, searching for words. "It's been a long time since this house felt like a home." The simple statement, delivered without artifice, touched Amelia deeply. "Miles, Whatever she might have said was interrupted by Hank approaching with a telegram. "This just arrived for you, boss. Ryder brought it from town." Miles thanked him and unfolded the paper, his expression growing serious as he read its contents. "Bad news?" Amelia asked when he finished. "Unexpected news," Miles corrected. "It's from Rebecca Walsh, Thomas's aunt in Denver. She's arriving in Hill City tomorrow on the afternoon train." "How did she know to come?" Amelia wondered. Miles smiled slightly. "I sent a telegram 2 weeks ago after the incident with you. I had a feeling Thomas might need her sooner rather than later." "You've been planning this all along," Amelia realized. "Not planning exactly. Preparing for possibilities." Miles folded the telegram and tucked it into his pocket. "Rebecca is a formidable woman. Having her here will give Thomas additional protection and show Cavendish we're serious about our ultimatum." "Will she stay in Hill City?" Amelia asked, already thinking of how she might help the woman settle in. "For a while at least. She has business interests in Denver that she can manage from a distance for some time." Miles hesitated, then added, "I offered her accommodations here at the ranch, but she'll likely prefer to stay in town closer to Thomas." Amelia nodded thoughtfully. "The Jenkins have a guest room they've offered to me. Perhaps Rebecca would be more comfortable there while I—" She trailed off, suddenly uncertain. "While you what?" Miles prompted gently. Amelia met his gaze directly. "While I remain here if the offer still stands, at least until we're certain Thomas is truly safe." Miles' expression softened, something warm kindling in his eyes. "The offer stands for as long as you wish, Amelia. This home is yours for however long you choose to stay." The words carried a weight beyond their literal meaning, an invitation neither was quite ready to articulate fully. But it was enough for now, this understanding between them that something had changed. that the connection forged in crisis had deepened into something neither had anticipated when he'd cut her free from that rope just weeks ago. As they stood together on the porch, looking out over the land that had become a sanctuary for both of them in different ways, Amelia felt a sense of rightness, of belonging, that she hadn't expected to find in this remote corner of South Dakota. Whatever challenges lay ahead with Cavendish and Thomas, whatever gossip might circulate in town about the schoolteacher and the rancher, she knew with sudden certainty that this was where she was meant to be, not just in Hill City teaching, but here with Miles, building something neither of them had known they were looking for. The next day brought Rebecca Walsh to Hill City on the afternoon train as promised. Miles and Amelia met her at the station, both impressed by the self-assured woman who stepped onto the platform. In her early 40s, Rebecca bore a striking resemblance to the portrait of Sarah that hung in the town hall, the same delicate features and intelligent eyes, though Rebecca's manner was more forthright than her sister's had reportedly been. "Mr. Grayson," she greeted Miles with a firm handshake. "Thank you for your telegram. I've been concerned about Thomas for some time." "Mrs. Walsh," Miles replied respectfully. "May I introduce Miss Amelia Calloway, Hill City's schoolteacher?" Rebecca turned her assessing gaze to Amelia. "Miss Calloway, my nephew mentions you in every letter. He says you're the first teacher who's made him feel capable rather than deficient." "Thomas is a wonderful student," Amelia replied warmly. "He just learns differently than some children." Yes, Sarah suspected as much. She struggled to convince Cavendish that Thomas wasn't simply being difficult. Rebecca's expression hardened momentarily at the mention of her brother-in-law, then softened again. "I'm eager to see the boy. Is he at school now?" "School ended an hour ago," Amelia explained. "He should be at home with his father." Rebecca nodded decisively. "Then that's where we'll go first. I want Cavendish to understand I'm here to stay until I'm satisfied my nephew is safe and properly cared for." Miles exchanged glances with Amelia. "Perhaps we should settle you at the Jenkins home first, let you rest from your journey before confronting Cavendish." "I didn't travel all this way to rest, Mr. Grayson," Rebecca replied firmly. "I came to protect my sister's son. The sooner Cavendish understands that, the better for everyone." Her determination reminded Amelia strongly of Thomas's quiet courage the previous day. The family resemblance went beyond physical features, it seemed. With Rebecca's luggage secured in the wagon Miles had brought, they set off for the Cavendish ranch, a sprawling property with a large main house that overlooked the town from a gentle hill. As they approached, Amelia felt her anxiety rising, remembering her previous encounters with the powerful rancher. Cavendish himself met them at the door, his expression darkening when he recognized his visitors. "Rebecca," he acknowledged coldly, "I didn't know you were coming." "That was rather the point, Darius," she replied evenly. "May we come in? I've traveled a long way to see my nephew." For a moment it seemed Cavendish might refuse, then with poor grace he stepped aside to allow them entry. The interior of the house was opulently furnished but oddly lifeless, lacking the warmth that made Miles' more modest home so inviting. "Thomas is in his room," Cavendish said, leading them to a sitting room rather than to his son. "He's been confined there since yesterday's incident." "Confined?" Rebecca repeated sharply. "For how long?" "Until he learns proper respect," Cavendish replied, his tone making it clear he considered the matter closed to discussion. Rebecca's eyes flashed. "I'd like to see him immediately." "This is my house, Rebecca. Things happen on my schedule, not yours." Before the confrontation could escalate, a small voice came from the doorway. "Aunt Rebecca." Thomas stood there, his face lighting up at the sight of his aunt. The bruise on his cheek had darkened overnight, stark against his pale skin, but his eyes were bright with joy. "Thomas." Rebecca exclaimed, moving to embrace him tightly. "Let me look at you. My, how you've grown since I saw you last." As aunt and nephew reunited, Cavendish turned his cold gaze on Miles and Amelia. "I suppose I have you to thank for this unwelcome visit." "Thomas deserves to have family who support his education and well-being," Miles replied unapologetically. "I am his family," Cavendish stated flatly. "And yet you confine him to his room for seeking help when frightened," Amelia observed, unable to remain silent. That's not how families treat each other, Mr. Cavendish. Before Cavendish could retort, Rebecca turned back to them, one arm still around Thomas's shoulders. Thomas has kindly offered to show me his room and his books. We'll be back shortly. Her pointed look at Cavendish dared him to object. When they had left, Cavendish poured himself a drink from a crystal decanter, not offering any to his remaining guests. State your purpose clearly, Grayson. What do you want from me? Nothing you haven't already agreed to, Miles replied. Thomas remains in school with Miss Calloway, providing extra help for his reading. He's treated with kindness and respect at home. If those conditions are met, nothing changes. And Rebecca's presence, what purpose does that serve? Insurance, Miles said bluntly. She's here to ensure you honor our agreement and to provide Thomas with the family support he needs. Cavendish's laugh was bitter. Family support? She hated me even before Sarah died. She'll poison the boy against me given half a chance. Perhaps she wouldn't feel that way if you treated Thomas with the care and respect he deserves, Amelia suggested, her voice gentler than her words. Cavendish studied her for a long moment. You're very invested in my son's welfare, Miss Calloway, for someone who's known him less than a month. I'm invested in all my students, Amelia replied steadily. Each one deserves the chance to learn in a safe environment, to develop their unique gifts without fear of punishment for their struggles. Pretty words, Cavendish said dismissively, but the real world isn't kind to weakness. I'm preparing Thomas for that reality. By making him fear you, Miles asked quietly. What does that teach him except that power means the right to terrify those weaker than yourself? Something flickered in Cavendish's eyes, not guilt precisely, but perhaps a moment of reflection. Before he could respond, Rebecca and Thomas returned, the boy carrying a book of maps he was eagerly showing his aunt. Thomas has invited me to stay here at the ranch, Rebecca announced, her tone making it clear this wasn't a request for permission. Cavendish's jaw tightened. There's no need for that. The hotel in town is perfectly adequate. I disagree, Rebecca replied smoothly. If I'm to help Thomas with his studies and ensure his welfare, being under the same roof makes the most sense. You have no right. Actually, I do, Rebecca interrupted, retrieving a folded document from her handbag. Sarah appointed me Thomas's guardian in the event of her death should you prove unsuitable. I've never exercised that right out of respect for the bond between father and son. But recent events have changed my assessment of the situation. Cavendish stared at the document she held out, his face paling. This won't stand in court. Perhaps not, Rebecca conceded. But a legal battle would be public, messy, and ultimately damaging to the Cavendish name you claim to value so highly. Is that what you want, Darius? For everyone to know how you treat your son? The standoff between them was tense, the air thick with unspoken threats and past grievances. Finally, Cavendish looked at his son, standing straight-backed beside his aunt despite the fear evident in his eyes. You want your aunt to stay here? He asked Thomas directly. Thomas nodded. Yes, sir. She can help me with my lessons like Mother used to. Something in Cavendish seemed to deflate at the mention of his late wife. Fine, Rebecca can stay. The East Wing has suitable rooms. He turned to Miles and Amelia. I believe our business is concluded for today. It was a dismissal, but not an aggressive one, more the retreat of a man reassessing his position. Miles nodded, recognizing the small victory for what it was. We'll leave you to get settled then, he said to Rebecca. Thomas, we'll see you at school tomorrow. As they took their leave, Rebecca accompanied them to the door while Cavendish remained in the sitting room staring into his glass. Thank you both, she said quietly, for everything you've done for Thomas and for contacting me. I've been worried about him for years, but felt powerless to intervene without clear evidence of mistreatment. Will you be safe here? Amelia asked, concerned about leaving the formidable but outnumbered woman in Cavendish's domain. Rebecca smiled, a determined expression that reminded Amelia strongly of Thomas. Darius and I have known each other for 15 years. He knows exactly what I'm capable of when provoked, especially where Thomas is concerned. We'll be fine. With goodbyes exchanged and promises to meet the following day, Miles and Amelia departed, both feeling a cautious optimism about the new development. "She's quite remarkable," Amelia observed as they drove back toward town. "I can see where Thomas gets his quiet courage." Rebecca was always the stronger of the two sisters, Miles agreed. Sarah was gentler, more willing to compromise for peace. It cost her, I think. "Do you believe Cavendish will honor the arrangement, allow Rebecca to stay and Thomas to continue at school?" Miles considered the question. "For now, yes. He's a proud man, but not stupid. He knows how it would look if he forced a public battle over Thomas's welfare, especially with that bruise still visible on the boy's face. And in the long term. That depends on whether Rebecca can help him see what he's losing by treating Thomas the way he has been." Miles glanced at her. "Some people can change when shown a better path, Amelia, even someone like Cavendish." "You're more optimistic than I expected," Amelia said, surprised by his perspective. Miles smiled slightly. "Not optimistic, just experienced. I've seen men change when given the right motivation and example. Rebecca might be exactly what both Thomas and Cavendish need." As they approached Hill City, Amelia expected Miles to turn toward the Jenkins home to drop her off. Instead, he continued toward the road leading to his ranch. "Aren't you taking me to the Jenkinses?" she asked, confused. Miles looked at her, something vulnerable in his expression that she hadn't seen before. "I thought you might still want to stay at the ranch with me, at least until we're certain Thomas is truly safe." The invitation hung between them, its meaning extending beyond the simple words. Amelia felt her heart quicken, knowing this moment represented a choice that would alter the course of her life in Hill City. "Yes," she said softly, "I'd like that very much." The smile that spread across Miles' face warmed her more than the afternoon sun. They continued toward the ranch in companionable silence, both aware that something significant had shifted between them, though neither was quite ready to name it yet. In the weeks that followed, a new rhythm established itself in Hill City. Thomas attended school regularly, his reading slowly improving under Amelia's patient guidance and Rebecca's support at home. Cavendish, while not transformed overnight, seemed to make an effort to moderate his treatment of his son, perhaps influenced by Rebecca's unwavering presence or perhaps simply to avoid further public scrutiny. Amelia continued staying at Miles' ranch, though a room was always available for her at the Jenkinses if needed. The arrangement raised eyebrows at first, but the town's respect for Miles and growing affection for Amelia soon quieted most of the gossip. Besides, Hill City had more interesting developments to discuss, like the plans for a harvest festival, the first such community celebration in years. The festival was Rebecca's idea, Walter explained at a town council meeting in early October. "A way to bring the community together before winter sets in." "It's an excellent suggestion," Amelia agreed enthusiastically. "The children could perform recitations or songs, perhaps display some of their schoolwork." The council embraced the idea wholeheartedly, assigning committees for food, decorations, music, and activities. To everyone's surprise, even Cavendish offered his support, donating beef for the barbecue and the use of his meadow near the creek as the festival grounds. "Rebecca's influence, no doubt," Miles commented when he heard. "She's always been persuasive." "Thomas says they actually talk now," Amelia told him as they sat on the porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the hills in gold and crimson. "Real conversations, not just Cavendish giving orders and Thomas saying yes, sir." "Progress," Miles acknowledged. "Slow, perhaps, but real." Amelia nodded, pulling her shawl closer against the autumn chill. "Rebecca mentioned that Cavendish has been reading to Thomas in the evenings. Adventure stories, mostly. It seems to be helping them connect." Miles smiled, reaching over to take her hand in a gesture that had become natural between them in recent weeks. "You started that, you know, showing Thomas that reading could be a joy, not just a chore." "Perhaps," Amelia said modestly, "but it was you who gave him the courage to stand up for himself that day. You showed him he deserved better." "We make a good team," Miles said softly, his thumb tracing gentle circles on the back of her hand. "We do, don't we?" Amelia agreed, turning to meet his gaze. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken feelings that had grown steadily since that first dramatic meeting. Miles lifted his free hand to brush a strand of hair from her face, his touch lingering on her cheek. "Amelia," he began, his voice husky with emotion. "These past months with you here, they've been the happiest I can remember since before the war." Her heart quickened at his words and the tenderness in his eyes. "For me too, Miles. When I came to Hill City, I was only looking for a place to teach. I never expected to find a home. Or, he prompted gently when she hesitated, or someone who would come to mean so much to me," she finished, her voice barely above a whisper. Miles' smile deepened, crinkling the corners of his eyes in the way she had come to love. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers, a kiss so gentle it was almost reverent, yet filled with the depth of feeling that had grown between them. When they finally parted, Miles rested his forehead against hers, their breath mingling in the cool evening air. "I love you, Amelia Calloway. I think I have since I cut you free from that rope and held you until you stopped shaking." Tears pricked Amelia's eyes at his declaration. "And I love you, Miles Grayson, more than I thought possible when we've known each other such a short time." "Time means little when you find the person who fits your soul," Miles replied, drawing her close against his side as they watched the final rays of sunlight fade from the hills. The harvest festival arrived on a perfect autumn day, clear skies, crisp air, and trees ablaze with red and gold along the creek. The entire town turned out, dressed in their Sunday best, eager to celebrate the community's unity and the bountiful harvest before winter set in. Amelia spent the morning with her students, arranging their display of maps, essays, and artwork on tables beneath a canopy of colorful leaves. Thomas was particularly excited to show his father the detailed map of South Dakota he had drawn, complete with careful lettering that showed his improving reading skills. "He'll be proud, Thomas," Amelia assured him as they put the finishing touches on the display. "You've worked so hard and it shows. Aunt Rebecca says father was good at maps too when he was young," Thomas confided, before he had to take over the ranch from grandfather. Amelia smiled at this glimpse of Cavendish as a boy, a reminder that even the most difficult adults were once children with dreams and interests of their own. "Perhaps that's where you get your talent from." By midday, the festival was in full swing. Tables groaned under the weight of autumn bounty roasted meats. Pies of every description, preserves, fresh bread, and vegetables prepared in a dozen different ways. Musicians played lively tunes, while children raced about in games of tag and adults caught up on news with neighbors they might not see again until spring thaws. Miles found Amelia near the schoolchildren's display, deep in conversation with Rebecca and Walter about plans to expand the school building. "There you are," he said, approaching with a plate of food in each hand. "I thought you might be hungry." Amelia accepted the plate gratefully. "Starving, actually. I was so busy with the children this morning I forgot about breakfast." "Why am I not surprised?" Miles teased gently. "Always putting your students first." Rebecca exchanged knowing glances with Walter. "We should check on the cider brewing," she suggested, tactfully giving Miles and Amelia a moment alone. As they ate, Amelia watched the community celebrating around them, families laughing together, old men swapping stories by the barbecue pits, young couples stealing shy glances across the dance area. "It's remarkable," she said, her voice soft with wonder. "When I arrived in Hill City, I never imagined such a scene was possible. Everyone seemed so isolated." "That was Cavendish's influence," Miles explained. "He preferred people dependent on him rather than on each other, but that's changing now. Because of Rebecca, partly. But also because of you, Amelia. You reminded this town what community truly means when you stood up for Thomas, when you refused to be driven away by intimidation." Amelia blushed at his praise. "I only did what was right." "Which is rarer than you might think," Miles replied, his gaze warm with admiration. Their conversation was interrupted by Thomas running up to them, excitement evident in his flushed face. "Miss Calloway, father wants to see my map display. Will you come explain how you taught me the special way to remember spelling the town names?" Amelia smiled at his enthusiasm. "Of course, Thomas. Lead the way." To her surprise, Darius Cavendish was indeed waiting by the school display, his expression more open than she had ever seen it. Rebecca stood beside him, a satisfied smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Miss Calloway," Cavendish greeted her with a slight nod, not warm, exactly, but lacking the hostility of their previous encounters. "Thomas tells me you've developed some special techniques to help with his reading difficulties." "Nothing special about recognizing that different minds learn in different ways, Mr. Cavendish," Amelia replied carefully. "Thomas is extremely intelligent. He just processes written information differently than most." "Show him the map method, Miss Calloway," Thomas urged, pulling her toward his displayed work. For the next several minutes, Amelia explained the mnemonic devices and visual cues she had developed to help Thomas remember letter patterns and word structures. To her surprise, Cavendish listened intently, asking thoughtful questions about how these methods might be applied to other subjects. "You've put considerable thought into my son's education, Miss Calloway," he said when she finished. "I appreciate your dedication." Coming from Cavendish, it was tantamount to effusive praise. Amelia inclined her head in acknowledgement. "Thomas makes it easy to go the extra mile, Mr. Cavendish. His enthusiasm for learning is infectious." "He gets that from his mother," Cavendish said, a shadow of old grief passing across his features. "Sarah was always eager to learn new things." "I hear you've been reading with him in the evenings," Amelia ventured, encouraged by this moment of vulnerability. "That's wonderful reinforcement for what we do in school." A faint smile touched Cavendish's lips. "It's been enlightening. I had forgotten how much I enjoyed adventure stories as a boy. Father's doing the voices for all the characters," Thomas confided with a grin. "Even the ladies, though he's not very good at those." Cavendish actually chuckled at his son's criticism. "Reading dramatically was always your mother's talent, not mine, but I'm learning." The exchange, so normal and affectionate, warmed Amelia's heart. She caught Rebecca's eye over Thomas's head, and the older woman gave her a subtle nod of acknowledgement, a silent communication between two women who had each, in their own way, helped bring about this transformation. As afternoon mellowed into evening, lanterns were lit around the festival grounds, casting a golden glow over the proceedings. Musicians struck up slower tunes, and couples began to gather for dancing. Miles appeared at Amelia's side, offering his hand with a formal bow that made her laugh. "May I have this dance, Miss Calloway?" "You may indeed, Mr. Grayson," she replied, placing her hand in his. He led her to the center of the dancing area, where other couples were already swaying to the music. His arm slipped around her waist, drawing her close as they began to move together. "Have I told you how beautiful you look today?" Miles murmured, his breath warm against her ear. Amelia smiled up at him, her heart full. "Only twice since breakfast. You're growing negligent in your compliments, sir." "A grave oversight," he agreed solemnly. "Allow me to remedy it immediately." "You, Amelia Calloway, are the most beautiful, courageous, and compassionate woman I have ever known. And I consider myself the luckiest man in South Dakota to be holding you in my arms." "Much better," Amelia approved, a blush warming her cheeks despite her teasing tone. "Though I believe I'm the fortunate one, to have found a man who values education as much as cattle, and who's willing to stand up for what's right even at personal risk." They danced in silence for a while, content simply to be together amid the celebration they had helped make possible. As the music shifted to another melody, Miles guided her toward the edge of the dancing area, then beyond, to a quiet spot beside the creek where the sounds of the festival were muted, and stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "I wanted a moment alone with you," he explained, still holding her hands in his. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you." Amelia felt her pulse quicken at the seriousness in his voice. "Yes." Miles took a deep breath as if gathering courage. "These past months have shown me what I was missing in my life, Amelia, not just companionship, but purpose beyond myself, a reason to build something lasting." He squeezed her hands gently. "I love you. I want to share my life with you, to create a home together, perhaps even a family someday. Will you marry me, Amelia Calloway?" Though she had begun to hope for this moment, the reality of it still brought tears to her eyes. Yes, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Yes, Miles Grayson, I will marry you. The joy that illuminated his face was like sunshine breaking through clouds. Miles drew her into his arms, his kiss conveying all the love and hope and promise that words could not fully express. When they finally parted, both breathless and laughing softly with happiness, Miles reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. This was my grandmother's, he explained, opening it to reveal a delicate gold ring with a small but perfect diamond. My sister kept it for me after our parents died, hoping I would find someone to give it to someday. It's beautiful, Amelia breathed as he slipped it onto her finger. Perfect. Hand in hand, they returned to the festival, where their news spread quickly through the gathering. Congratulations poured in from all sides, Walter Jenkins raising a toast with cider, the doctor's wife insisting on planning the wedding feast, even Cavendish offering a grudging handshake to Miles and a nod to Amelia. Thomas was perhaps the most excited of all, practically bouncing with joy when he heard the news. Does this mean you'll live at the ranch forever, Miss Calloway, and will you still be my teacher? Yes to both, Amelia assured him, touched by his enthusiasm. Though you'll have to get used to calling me Mrs. Grayson at some point. I think I can manage that, Thomas replied with a grin. As the festival wound down and families began the journey home by wagon and horseback, Miles and Amelia remained behind, helping with the cleanup alongside Walter, Rebecca, and a few others. Have you set a date? Rebecca asked as they folded tablecloths together. We're thinking of Christmas, Amelia replied. A small ceremony in the church if Reverend Simmons is willing. He'll be delighted, Walter assured her. And so will the town. Nothing lifts spirits during the long winter like a wedding to celebrate. Later, as Miles and Amelia rode back to the ranch beneath a canopy of stars, a comfortable silence enveloped them, the quiet of two people who had found in each other exactly what they needed, who could communicate as much through presence as through words. It's strange, Amelia said finally as the ranch came into view, lanterns glowing warmly in the windows where Hank had lit them in anticipation of their return. When I was dragged behind that horse, terrified and in pain, I never imagined that moment would lead to the greatest happiness of my life. Miles reached across to take her hand, his touch as reassuring now as it had been that first day when he'd cut her free and held her until the shaking stopped. Life's strange that way, he agreed softly. Sometimes our worst moments lead us exactly where we need to be. Amelia squeezed his hand, the diamond on her finger catching the starlight. I'm exactly where I need to be, Miles, right here with you. The wedding took place on Christmas Eve, with the church filled to capacity despite the snow that had begun falling that morning. Amelia wore a dress of deep blue velvet, a gift from the ladies of Hill City who had worked together in secret to create it. Miles, standing at the altar in his best suit, thought he had never seen anything as beautiful as Amelia walking toward him on Walter's arm, her face radiant with joy. Thomas served as ring bearer, proudly carrying the simple gold bands on a small velvet cushion. Rebecca stood as Amelia's matron of honor, while Hank served as Miles' best man. Even Cavendish attended, sitting quietly in a back pew, his presence a silent acknowledgement of the peace that had gradually taken hold in Hill City. The Reverend Simmons kept the ceremony simple but meaningful, speaking of love's ability to transform not just two lives but an entire community. When Miles and Amelia exchanged their vows, there was hardly a dry eye in the church. I, Miles Grayson, take you, Amelia Calloway, to be my lawfully wedded wife, Miles said, his voice steady and sure. To have and to hold from this day forward for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. I, Amelia Calloway, take you, Miles Grayson, to be my lawfully wedded husband, Amelia responded, her eyes never leaving his. To have and to hold from this day forward for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. As Miles slipped the wedding band onto her finger to join her engagement ring, Amelia felt a sense of completion, of having found the place and person she was meant for all along. The celebration afterward, held in the town hall, decorated with evergreen boughs and candles, lasted well into the night despite the continuing snowfall. There was dancing and feasting, toasts and laughter, the community coming together to celebrate not just a marriage but their own renewed bonds. Late in the evening, as the party continued around them, Miles drew Amelia aside to a quiet corner. "Happy, Mrs. Grayson?" he asked softly, his arms encircling her waist. "Completely," she assured him, leaning into his embrace. "Though I think it might take some time to get used to my new name." "We have plenty of time," Miles promised, brushing a kiss against her temple. A lifetime, in fact. And they did have time years that unfolded with the steady rhythm of ranch life and the school calendar, of changing seasons and growing community. The small schoolhouse expanded into a proper building with multiple rooms as Hill City grew. Amelia continued teaching, eventually training new teachers to help with the increased student population. Miles' ranch prospered as well, his fair business practices and innovative methods earning respect throughout the territory. Together, he and Amelia built a life rich in purpose and connection, their home always open to those in need of guidance or shelter. Thomas Cavendish grew from a shy boy struggling with reading into a confident young man who combined his father's business acumen with his mother's love of learning. The relationship between father and son, while never without its challenges, gradually healed under Rebecca's patient influence and Amelia's continuing guidance. 2 years after their wedding, Amelia gave birth to a son they named James, after Miles' father. A daughter, Sarah Rebecca, followed 2 years later, named for Thomas's mother and aunt. The children grew up surrounded by books and open spaces, equally at home in the classroom and on horseback. On their 5th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, a tradition they had maintained since those early days, Miles presented Amelia with a journal bound in soft leather. "What's this?" she asked, opening it to find blank pages. "For our story," Miles explained. "I thought you might want to write it down someday, for the children. How their mother was dragged behind a horse, and how their father cut her free and held her until she stopped shaking. How that moment of danger became the beginning of everything good in our lives." Amelia leaned against him, the journal clutched to her chest. "Our story," she repeated softly. "I think I'd like that very much." And so she began to write, preserving for future generations the tale of how love had bloomed in the wild Dakota territory, how courage and compassion had transformed not just 2 lives but an entire community, and how sometimes the most unpromising beginnings could lead to the most beautiful of destinies. Years later, when their children asked how they had met, Miles and Amelia would exchange a glance filled with private meaning before beginning the story that had become a family legend, a story of danger and rescue, of standing together against intimidation, of finding home in unexpected places. "Your father saved my life," Amelia would say, her hand finding Miles automatically, the gesture as natural as breathing after so many years together. "And your mother saved mine," Miles would add, his eyes still holding the same warmth they had when he'd first proposed beside the creek at the Harvest Festival. "In every way that matters." It was a love story unlike any other in Hill City, born in a moment of crisis, tested through conflict, and strengthened by the shared purpose of creating something lasting in the challenging landscape of the American West. A story that began with a terrified woman being dragged behind a horse and a brave cowboy who cut her free, holding her until the shaking stopped, and continued through a lifetime of building, nurturing, and loving together. And in the end, that was the greatest adventure of all.